Good morning, guys. We're going to pick back up here in 1 Samuel, and we're going to be finishing up chapter 13 and hopefully make it through chapter 15. There's a lot of events that take place here, so want to highlight some of the main events and and ultimately lead up to chapter 16, where we're going to see David anointed king. As pointed out in our last study, I spoke of Saul as politician, Samuel as prophet, and then as David as poet, which we'll be meeting David in chapter 16. So we'll be meeting him here shortly. But just to point to this idea of politician, jumping ahead here in chapter 15 of 1 Samuel, in verse 24, uh, Saul is having this interaction with Samuel, acknowledging his sins, and he says, "I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord and your words, because I feared the people and obeyed their voice." Throughout the Bible, through Proverbs and even already in our studies, we have been counseled to not fear man. We've been counseled to fear God, not man. And right here, Saul is acknowledging his actions, in response to fearing the people and obeying their voice. And that really gives some context to this idea of politician, of, kind of, looking out, seeing what's up with the people, and then making decisions as such. So not seeking a higher counsel, but tailoring choices based on exactly what the people want, and obeying their voice, not the voice of God. So in chapter 13, Jonathan and Saul were each geographically located north and south of this garrison of the Philistines in Geba. Saul was in Michmash with 2,000 men. Jonathan was in the south in Gibeah of Benjamin with 1,000 men, and then Geba was right in the center. And Jonathan attacked this garrison of the Philistines, and in so doing, roused the Philistines. And the Philistines gathered in chapter 13, verse 5. It says, "Gathered together to fight with Israel 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen, and people as the sand which is on the seashore in multitude." And once that happened, the people, as we saw in verses 6 through verses 6 through 7, through 6 through 8, when the men of Israel saw that they were in danger, for the people were distressed, then the people hid in caves and thickets and rocks and holes and in pits. And then some of them were even running to the east, crossing over the Jordan into the lands of Gad and Gilead. So remember, the Philistines are always on this western front of the Israelites. And then as for Saul, he was still in Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. And then later on, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattered. So the people are distressed, they're trembling, they're scattering, they're literally hiding in these rocks. And that's where Saul was here, or is in 13. And, as a leader, he's waiting on Samuel to show up after this prescribed 7 days. Samuel's not showing up. He takes things into his own hands. He performs this sacrifice, which he shouldn't be doing because he's not a Levite. And in performing the sacrifice, he breaks the commandment. And Samuel's admonishment and not advice, but just statement to him is that you've broken the commandment, and the kingdom shall not continue under your rule. And then in verses 16 through 23, Saul, Jonathan, his son, and the people present with him remained in Gibeah of Benjamin, but the Philistines encamped in Michmash, and these raiders are being sent out, coming into and raiding the Israelites. And in verse 19 it says, "Now there was no blacksmith to be found throughout all the land of Israel, for the Philistines said, lest the Hebrews make swords or spears." Where the Hebrews are at right now, the Israelites, there's no blacksmiths, and so what that speaks to is iron. So So the Philistines had literally removed the blacksmiths from the Hebrews, and it says, "Lest the Hebrews make swords or spears." The metal during this time period, the primary metal was bronze, but there was also iron. There was a shift into iron. So bronze being this alloy of copper and tin to make a harder metal, while iron would even be harder than that. And with there being no blacksmith, that speaks to the iron, because with iron you need a lot of fuel and you need heat. And so with there being no blacksmiths, any iron which the Israelites might have with their tools of agriculture, um, uh, they would have to go to the Philistines to sharpen their tools. So lack of weapons, sheer numbers. It seems right now they don't even have the numbers. The people are scattered. They're outnumbered with the Philistines physically, and also even with weapons, and even a less, even an inferior metal here to even use as weapons. Yet in chapter 14, Jonathan, it says, "Now it happened one day that Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who bore his armor, 'Come, let us go over to the Philistines' garrison that is on the other side.' But he didn't tell his father." And Jonathan goes up, and it's really summed up. Jonathan's fate here is he goes up against this Philistine garrison, and he says to his armor bearer in verse 6, "Come, let us go over the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us. For nothing restrains the Lord from saving by many or by few." And it's this great faith that, just Jonathan willing to step out, that is going to save the Israelites from these numbers, from these vast numbers of the Philistines and this superior army. And in the armor bearers, this is sweet in verse 7, "Do all that is in your heart. Go then. Here I am with you." And I think of just going forth two by two, and how important that is, of having someone walk beside you. And here's Jonathan's armor bearer. "Go then, here I am with you according to your heart." And we're even going to see this later on as Jonathan becomes David's armor bearer. Just kind of pointing to some future verses that we'll see. And so they do, Jonathan and his armor bearer cross over, and Jonathan says to his armor bearer, "If very well, let us cross over to these men, and we will show ourselves to them. If they say thus to us, 'Wait until we come up to you,' then we will stand still in our place and not go up to them. But if they say thus, 'Come up to us,' then we will go up, for the Lord has delivered them into our hand, and this will be a sign to us." And then in verse 12, the men of the garrison saw them. Actually, let's take a step back. Verse 11, the Philistines see them, and they say, "Hey, look, the Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they have hidden." I can almost hear the sarcasm in this. This sarcasm of of these Philistines. "Oh yeah, just feeling like they totally outnumber the Hebrews. Hey, look, they're coming out of the rocks." And then the men of the garrison called to Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, "Come up to us, and we will show you something." And then Jonathan says to his armor bearer, "Come up after me, for the Lord has delivered them into the hand of Israel." So there were 20 there in the garrison, and Jonathan and his armor bearer slaughter all 20. And then right on the heels of that, in verse 15, it says, "There was trembling in the camp, in the field, and among all the people. And then the garrison and the raiders also trembled, and the earth quaked. And so it was a very great trembling." So Saul, not being far away with the people there, they're seeing this trembling. They're seeing all this stuff going on. There's this multitude melting away, and then people are going here and there. So there's this mayhem of sorts, it seems like, going on here. And then Saul does a roll call, sees that Jonathan and the armor bearer is not there. He counsels, or tells rather, Ahijah, "He bring the ark of God here." And it happened while Saul talked to the priests that the noise which was in the camp of the Philistines continued to increase. And at this point, Saul is seeing this shift. There's just this mayhem going on, and he tells Ahijah, "Withdraw your hand." So hands on the ark, speaking towards, looking to God, and then now he's telling him to withdraw the hand. So now Saul once again is taking things into his own hands and moving forward, and that's what he does. And says there was very great confusion. Indeed, every man's sword was against his neighbor. Speaking to this mayhem. And it says in verse 21, moreover, the Hebrews who were with the Philistines before that time, who went up with them into the camp from the surrounding country, they also joined the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. Likewise, all the men of Israel who had hidden in the mountains of Ephraim, they also followed hard after them in the battle. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle shifted to Beth Aven. So just with the beginnings of Jonathan and his armor bearer, these two men going into this garrison of 20, killing them, and then God falling with this earthquake, causing this great confusion. Now all of a sudden, and it's even the Hebrews. So there were Hebrews that had gone with the Philistines. So I imagine probably were serving them in some way. So now the Hebrews that were with the Philistines, they're attacking. Men are coming out of hiding, they're attacking. So it just takes very few to start. And in this case, it was Jonathan with his great faith. He starts it, and now everybody's coming out in mass number, taking on the Philistines. And then Saul makes this rash oath for no man to eat any food until evening. And we see through chapter 14 here that really this oath, Jonathan, ultimately in verse 29, it troubles him. He says, my father has troubled the land. Look now how my countenance has brightened because I tasted a little of this honey. So with this oath of Saul, Saul had said, hey guys, don't eat until I've gotten vengeance, complete vengeance on my enemies. And, this is right in the middle of battle. And in the middle of the battle, there's this honey, or this, representing the spoil among the enemy. But yet they were told not to eat, so they can't imbibe or indulge, if you will, and gather sustenance. Jonathan didn't hear this. He had eaten, so he'd obviously broken the oath. And then even later on, as the people continued in battle, I assume they were hungry. In verse 32, it says, the people rushed on the spoil, took sheep, ox, and calves, slaughtered them on the ground, and the people ate them with the blood. So they weren't even taking time to cook it. And blood was so key to the Israelites, and they were never, it was a commandment not to eat the blood, the blood of the animals, and that's exactly what they were doing. Saul does recognize this. He builds an altar, commands the people to bring, there to, they can make a proper, sacrifice and a proper eating of the oxen and whatnot, so that they aren't eating of the blood. And then there's this lot that takes place because Saul's recognizing that there's a sin among the people, and the lot falls on Jonathan. So with these lots, they're tracking who the sin falls on, and it falls on Jonathan. Evidently from him breaking this oath of Saul, this initial oath that had taken place, and so it falls on him, and Saul had said, to Jonathan, tell me what you've done. And Jonathan told him, I only tasted a little honey with the end of the rod that was in my hand. So now I must die? And Saul answered, God do so and more also, for you shall surely die, Jonathan. But the people, this is verse 45, the people said to Saul, shall Jonathan die who has accomplished this great deliverance in Israel? Certainly not. As the Lord lives, not one hair of his head shall fall to the ground, for he has worked with God this day. So the people rescued Jonathan, and he did not die. Then Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. The people recognized what Jonathan had done, and recognized the faith of Jonathan, and recognized that Israel had been delivered for what Jonathan had done, and also even recognized the rashness of this oath that Saul had made. And then chapter 14 ends with Saul here, and speaking of the continued wars, that he has. It says, Saul established his sovereignty over Israel. He fought against all his enemies on every side, against Moab, Ammon, Edom, Zobah, and against the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he harassed them, and he gathered an army and attacked the Amalekites and delivered Israel from the hands of those who plundered him. And then we see who the sons and even the daughters were of Saul here in verses 49 through 51. And it finishes with, now there was fierce war with the Philistines all the days of Saul, and when Saul saw any strong man or any violent man, he took him for himself. Okay, guys, we'll pick up in 15 next time. God bless you, and may you have a great day.